You can join us live for our next BookFunnel webinar. Check out the link in the description for more details. We hope to see you there.
All right, we are going to get to our presentation. We are going to be talking about fixing broken reader magnets, why your reader magnet isn't growing your list or converting to sales. So that is the topic for today. Of course, reader magnets, this is a topic that I like to talk about a lot. I've done a number of webinars on this topic. And I think for a lot of folks, they may already have a reader magnet that they've been using, and maybe it's not giving them the results that they wanted, or you're implementing a new reader magnet and you're just not seeing what you were hoping to see. And so we're going to talk about some of the failure points and the breaking points for reader magnets. And it's not always what you think, right? And so that's the tricky part, is that it might seem on the surface like, okay, well, maybe this is the issue. Maybe that's the issue. We're going to try to give you some ideas of how you can pinpoint what the issue is so you can understand better what's going on. So what we're going to cover, first, we're going to talk a little bit about what a reader magnet's job is. We kind of need to define that first before we go into like, what is the issue here with your reader magnet? We need to make sure we define what working is, right, first, so that we know what our expectations are. A reader magnet is not a silver bullet, right? It's not a magic spell that just brings you all the readers. So we need to understand that when we're going into this process. We will do a little bit of a self-diagnosis poll then, which will be kind of fun. So be ready in chat. Have your fingers ready to type when we get to that section here, because I want to hear your guys' feedback and know, like, what is the main pain point for you as authors? What are you guys seeing? We will talk about the 5 different ways that magnets fail, and there's probably more than 5, right? But 5 main ways where we're 5 main failure points. And then we're also going to talk about when it's not those things, when it's the story, and we'll get to that as well at the end, and then time for Q&A. So to start with, what a working reader magnet does do. So a reader magnet has 2 primary jobs. It's going to acquire you subscribers, opt-ins at an acceptable cost or effort, right? And it's going to activate them or turn them into readers who click, read, review, buy, whatever behavior it is that you're wanting to encourage, right? So those are the 2 primary jobs of a reader magnet. Reader magnets and bonus content do other things too. They help retain readers on your list. They help do all those sorts of things. But generally, when people think of a reader magnet, I want to grow my list. I want to get more readers on my list. And I want to turn those readers who have the free book into people who will buy the next book, read through my series, become super fans, go through the whole process. Just note, many magnets do job 1 and fail at 2, or vice versa. So you might have a book that really does a great job of acquiring subscribers, but it fails to activate them. That might be where the failure point is. Or maybe it's the other way around. It's not acquiring subscribers, but the subscribers who do claim that reader magnet, they wind up converting, they wind up becoming activated. And so there's 2 different problems there potentially that you might have if you just look at it this way. But again, we're going to break down kind of the individual points along the line where that can happen. You want your reader magnet to do both of those things. You want it to acquire you new readers, and you want it to do the job of activating them to do whatever it is you want them to do. And again, that goal is generally going to be, for most authors, you want them to go on to buy book 1, right? For example, but it might be something else, right? Whatever your goal happens to be. So if your goal is different than that, than like making the sale, just insert that goal in there today when we're talking about getting sales conversions off of your reader magnets. So a quick poll for you here. You might want to pull up the Zoom chat because I want to get your input on this. So I want to know which pain point is yours. Hold on here for a moment because there's several of them I'm going to go through. Or I suppose if you might have multiple pain points. So as I show them on the screen here, if one of them resonates with you, go ahead and type that one in. So A, you're not getting enough signups for your reader magnet, or you're not getting as many as you would like. Obviously, this is assuming you've put it out there in front of readers in the first place, right? You don't just have a landing page that's there on your BookFunnel dashboard that you haven't shared with the world. B, you have signups, but low engagement. They sign up to your newsletter, and that part's fine. But once they're on your newsletter or they're on your mailing list, they're not really doing what you expected them to do. They're not opening emails. They're not clicking when they do open emails. The behavior you were looking for, the reader behavior, it just isn't there. C, you have reads, they're actually reading the book, but you're not getting reviews off of that. Maybe that's what you were looking for, was you were hoping to get reviews on that reader magnet, build an ARC team. We talked about this before in a few different webinars, where you can use a reader magnet to build an ARC team if that's your goal and that's what you're looking for, right? And you're not seeing, that could be your pain point. And again, maybe you're getting reviews, maybe you're getting all those other things before that, but you're not getting sales. And maybe it's the sales that you were really looking for, right? So let's see here. Let me take a peek. Let me take a peek. I almost forgot sales, but it's just too slow. Like everything's moving, but it's just not moving fast enough. We've got an A, B, C, D in here. We've got a B and a C, B through D, C and D, A, B, A, C, A. Okay, so all over the place, which is great. Because that means that all these points of failure that I'm going to talk about should be applicable to a wide variety of people. I'm seeing lots of A's and B's though, so we're not getting enough signups, and when we're getting the signups, we're not getting a lot of engagement. So we will talk about that. Excellent. All right. So let's continue here. So the 5 ways that reader magnets will fail. Let's go into these. First, it can be a mismatch. You have maybe the right promise, but for the wrong reader. This is often an issue of audience. Say you write women's fiction and you put your book into your reader magnet into like a BookFunnel romance promo. While there's some overlap in that readership, women's fiction and romance are 2 different things, right? And they have two different sets of expectations from readers. This can also happen if, for example, you put like I'm a science fiction author, for example. When I join BookFunnel group promos, I'm careful to avoid BookFunnel group promos that include sci-fi romance for this exact reason, because there's a different set of expectations. But beyond that, even if we're talking outside of the scope of BookFunnel promos, right? What is the genre that you're kind of like putting on the package of the reader magnet? And does it mismatch, or is there a conflict between what you've said the genre is and what the typical reader expectations in that genre are? That can also be the issue sometimes, where maybe you were getting it in front of the right readers for the promise that you've made, but you don't actually fulfill that promise in the story. The genre you've labeled your book as, your reader magnet as, is not correct, and that can cause a mismatch. Friction. It's too hard to claim, download, or start reading. Of course, BookFunnel is here to help you with a lot of this. In fact, that's why BookFunnel exists in the first place. BookFunnel was created to do this exact sort of thing. And generally speaking, claiming a book through BookFunnel, once you get to a landing page, should be pretty simple. But there are some things that you can do as the author that can add friction to that process. And so we're going to talk about that, break some of that down. For the most part, the BookFunnel process is fairly simple, but there are some other steps of the process that can add more friction, or if you're putting too much information on your landing page or what have you. So we'll talk about that. There's a weak next step. There's nothing compelling after the free part of the reader magnet. There's no clear signal to them what they have to do, or there's too many signals, right? Do this and this and this and this. We'll talk about that and how that can affect things. And then there's a sequence gap. Emails, typically this would be like an automation sequence, follow up after your reader magnet, doesn't bridge the gap to the purchase or the review or whatever it is you want them to do, right? There's a gap in there that we need to fill. And then it can also be measurement blindness. You can't tell what's broken. You don't know because you don't have the data, or you haven't looked at the data or compiled it. And so some of you might be in this situation where things aren't working, but you're not really sure why. You don't really know what's going wrong. It's also probably worthwhile for all of you to not assume that you know the problem to some degree as well, and look at all of this with open eyes and realize, okay, well, I think the problem is this, but the problem is actually this when I look at the numbers, right? So that's something that you have to consider. So failure mode number 1, this is that mismatch we were talking about. Symptoms, so we'll lay it all out here. Low conversion on the page. So they click on the page, lots of clicks, but very few opt-ins. This can be caused by a wrong genre signal. an unclear story promise. That would be in your blurb, your book description, right? What promise are you making to the reader? The wrong reader problem, again, you're getting it in front of the wrong reader, or it's the wrong magnet type. We've talked about different types of reader magnets. There are some advanced reader magnets we did talk about in a webinar last month, right? Typically for new readers, they're looking for an introductory short story or a prequel or something to get them invested. Maybe it's even book one if you're doing sort of like a first in series free type strategy. That's kind of what they're expecting in that initial reader magnet experience. And so if you're giving them some different type of bonus content, it's technically a reader magnet, but it's like it's not related to the story, that can cause a mismatch issue. So some fixes here for you. Does the cover scream the subgenre or genre? It should very clearly communicate it. We see this data all the time as author support specialists. When a book cover does not show clearly that it fits in this genre or subgenre, or this is the audience it's trying to court, it will get clicks sometimes, but it will not get the conversion. Sometimes the cover can actually stop it from even being clicked on in the first place. So keep that in mind. Is the headline benefit clear in 3 seconds? They're looking at it, and can they, from that headline or from the largest text on the page, get the gist of what the promise is? What are they getting from this? In the case of nonfiction, right, this is really important. With fiction, it can be buried sometimes a little bit, but that tagline that you use or that large heading on your landing page should clearly communicate to them what they're going to get or what their experience is going to be. In the case of nonfiction, this can be very direct, right? 5 tips on, house training your dog. Right? For nonfiction authors, you have it on easy mode. It's obvious. For fiction authors, you kind of have to give them the promise of what the story is going to entail. And again, is the magnet the right entry point? Is this the prequel? Is this book one? Is this a bonus chapter? A bonus chapter probably wouldn't be the best first entry point for a reader because there's going to be all kinds of missing context, right? A prequel or book one would typically be better. So those are the things that we need to know. We need to make sure that we have those lined up. So the promise triangle, I want to talk about this here for a moment. Your landing page must align in terms of a genre signal. So that's the book cover and the vibe of the landing page too. That goes beyond the book cover a little bit, right? Your theme, your colors that you pick, that sort of thing. The hook, right? What's the experience that the reader is going to get? The hook is you're promising them this is the experience you're going to have. And that's very specific to a given genre, right? There are hooks for romance and there are hooks for science fiction. I write space marine, military, post-apocalyptic sci-fi. That's one of my books. The promise of that is very different from a contemporary romance. There's lots of different things going on in those two genres. So I can't write a hook based off of what a romance author would do. I need to look at some folks in my genre to see. And the payoff, right? Why should they continue? Why should they actually open the book and read, right? So those 3 things, the genre signal, the hook, and the payoff, like they should get some hint about what they're going to get out of it. If any one of those corners of that triangle is off, you could be attracting the wrong readers, or you're going to attract no one because it's just not all going to add up for them. Send the wrong genre signal. You're going to attract the wrong readers. Use the wrong hook. Again, like I said, maybe you're not writing romance, but you have a romantic subplot, but you make that romantic subplot the main focus of your hook or payoff, but your book isn't really a romance. That's going to cause some problems. Vice versa as well. Your book is a romance, but you're going to make the hook or the payoff talk more about the action and the plot and less about the romance. Again, you're going to potentially be attracting the wrong type of readers. I keep bringing up romance because it's a really easy example, but this also applies between subgenres as well. You have to know your genre and your subgenre very well if you're going to do this. For example, if you write dark fantasy, there's a distinction between dark fantasy and epic fantasy, right? There's also technically a distinction between dark fantasy and grimdark fantasy. Very subtle, right? And if you're wondering, what are those things, Jack? I don't even know what those are. Exactly. But your readers do. Readers know these things, not by name, but they know them by the verbiage that authors tend to use. So some things you can do here, get feedback from readers. If you're starting to see this mismatch, talk to a literary editor. See if they can tell you where your book actually fits. Maybe you think it's this genre, but it's not. And that's affected the way you've marketed your book. And that's causing this mismatch issue with your reader magnet. And this can be true not just for reader magnets, this can be true for your entire series in that case. So it's something to keep in mind, even beyond the scope of your reader magnet. But because your reader magnet for many readers is their first experience, we're talking about it here. So failure mode number 2, this is friction. So symptoms, the page converts okay, but delivery or downloads rather, and read through is low. So they might give you their email, but then it seems like there's just like a loss after that. So common friction points to be aware of: too many or confusing calls to action. There's book file issues. For example, PDFs and fixed layout EPUBs, generally not super friendly for fiction. Much more appropriate in nonfiction, and in particular, children's books, where PDFs really shine. For some reason, somebody at some point sent out a memo that whenever you send out an ARC, it needs to be a PDF. This is related, I promise. And so we have lots of authors who come to us and want to distribute their ARCs as PDFs, and we tell them, no, don't do it. Use an EPUB. It's a much better reader experience if you're just writing a novel and it's primarily text. So that could be a reason. They open it up and it's just clunky to read, and maybe they shouldn't have any trouble getting it to their device. If they do, right? Obviously, there's a BookFunnel support there to help them out. But even if they get to that point, if the reading experience isn't great because of the file format or because of poor formatting, they're not going to continue. These are things you need to check. And so I would actually go through and look at the experience of readers. The mobile experience is one of those pieces of the puzzle as well. You want to be thinking about this from a mobile perspective. Most of your readers are going to find your book on a mobile device these days. That's just the way it's going to be. 75% or more readers are going to be claiming your reader magnet on a mobile device. So keep that in mind. Most people will do email on a mobile device. And if email is how they're getting a link to the group promo that you're in, they're going to be on their mobile device when they click on your book and claim it. You need to be considering this at every point of the chain, though, too. So it's not just your landing page and how it looks on mobile, but it's the book itself. How does it read on mobile? Your automation sequence emails that go out, right? Make sure you look at all that stuff on mobile. So much of that work we wind up doing on a desktop, you probably do it in that context. And your readers are going to have a total different experience. So if you set up your landing page, your BookFunnel landing page on a desktop, it's going to look one way. But all BookFunnel landing pages adapt to the screen size. And so you might do some stuff with like your book description and put a lot of information in there. But on mobile, that gets put under the button. And so now it's below the fold. And maybe there was some compelling stuff there that could be somewhere else, or it's not going to do the work for you that you thought it was going to do. And then, of course, there's the check your email bottleneck. This is to some extent unavoidable, right? There's only so much we can do about this, particularly with the way that email works. It is what it is, but it is something to be aware of. There's going to be a certain percentage of readers who claim your book. They'll get the email and they'll just never go open it, right? So this is unavoidable to a degree, but this is also a reason why you should have an automation sequence that sends out multiple emails. And I guess you want your automation sequence to assume the type of behavior that you want the reader to take. So if you're assuming I want my reader to claim my reader magnet and start reading it now, like in 15 minutes, they're going to start reading, your automation sequence should be geared around that idea. If you have more of a long-term kind of strategy, like I understand my reader magnet's going to be on their TBR, they might get to it eventually, you might spread out the emails in your welcome sequence more. Kind of just depends on which strategy you want to go. But my point being, multiple emails help you get more readers through that bottleneck. So all the fixes here, they all just appeared on the screen all at once. Don't worry, I'll go through them one at a time. So having a single dominant call to action on the landing page. This is typically going to be on the button on a BookFunnel landing page. We give you actually a pretty decent one. Get my book is actually pretty good, but you can change it if you want to. Just don't overcomplicate it. Use simple formatting with a file format that matches reader expectations. If it's a novel, it should be an EPUB. If it's a children's book, it should definitely be a PDF, maybe a fixed layout EPUB if it's image heavy. Fiction can kind of go either way, just depends on how many images you have. If it's image heavy, PDF, fixed layout EPUB are a little bit better fit. Really comes down to images. A clear what happens next microcopy on your thank you page. This is your BookFunnel thank you page. All of your email collection pages are actually 2 pages. If you didn't know, right? There's the initial page where they submit their email, and there's the thank you page where they download it. Give them some idea of what's going to happen next. In fact, that's the better place to put more info. We were talking about stuff that winds up being below the fold. Your thank you page, they're going to spend more time on than they will on that initial landing page. So put more of that info there. Stuff like, you're going to be hearing from me soon, right? I'll be emailing you in a few minutes to make sure you didn't have any trouble, or what have you. A welcome email to catch anyone having difficulties. Of course, send them to BookFunnel Reader Support because that is part of the friction process. It can happen. For the most part, it's not too bad. Most readers do just fine. I can tell you, we have 3 dedicated reader support team members on the BookFunnel support team. Every reader had trouble getting their books and sideloading them. We would need about 30 people. Right? But most readers can figure it out. It's a minority of readers who just have trouble with the process just because. So you should have some confidence. But for those who do, your welcome email, I always recommend, and that first email should include, hey, did you have trouble getting your book? Here's a big orange button that will send you to the BookFunnel help page. Right? That helps reduce some of that friction. So a week next step in your reader magnet. This is when you have decent reads, right? They're reading the reader magnet as far as you can tell, but there's low clicks to the next book or the next step in the process. And the cause here is that the magnet ends with no urgency or no direction, no reason to continue. Sometimes this is story related. Sometimes this is call to action related. So keep that in mind, right? This is where the creative and the practical are kind of overlapping here. So fixes for a weak next step failure. Add an end of book call to action page and make it explicit. What do you want them to do? What is the thing you want them to do next? They're already on your newsletter, so I'm guessing that's not something that you need them to do now, but hey, maybe you want them to buy book 1. Well, you can just send them to Amazon or your direct store to buy book 1. You could do that, of course. Sometimes you might want to break that up, though. Maybe you want to give them a sample of book 1, because what that also gives you is another trigger that you can track when they download book 1, and that maybe adds them to a new group in your newsletter and triggers a new automation sequence. See what I mean? There's some additional things you can capitalize on there. And if you like this, that is the reader magnet, you'll love Y. It was originally the first draft of this was X and Y, which is why that Y doesn't make any sense here. But I think you understand what I mean. Use that. If they enjoyed your reader magnet, and they should, tell them that, hey, the promise I made for this is the same promise you're going to get in what comes next. It should be a 1 button next step as well. If this is the prequel, it should go to book 1. If this is book 1, it should go to book 2 or the series starter or whatever the case might be. For those of you who write in collections, right, but not a series, right, you should still have an idea of how you want to direct them through and bounce them around, right? Because readers kind of have that expectation. So even if your books aren't in a linear series, but they're in a collection of some kind, show them what you want to show them next, right? Because that's kind of what readers expect. And remember, too many calls to action equals no calls to action. You want to streamline things. If you throw a bunch of info at them at that call to action step, it's going to be too much, right? Like, well, you're on my mailing list, so here's book 1, and there's this other bonus story that I've got for you. And then you can go over here and subscribe to join my Patreon. And right, you see how there's just too much. There's just too much going on. right? We want to streamline it. We want to have a very specific, discrete action we want them to take at the end of that reader magnet. So failure mode number 4, this is a sequence gap. So the symptoms of this, the engagement is okay, but sales are low. For example, your end goal, again, we talked about reviews, we talked about some other things in there. So there's something missing. All of the other steps along this point look to be fine. They're reading the book, they're clicking on that call to action, and then something is going wrong, right? Well, the emails you're sending them might not be bridging them from free to paid. We've talked about this a little bit so far. So we want to fix that bridge, for example, in a 3 email sequence that might look like this. So we have a delivery and a start now email. That's our initial welcome sequence. Get them started, get the ball rolling. The next email, we're offering some additional value or context why this series matters. The reading order, right? We're showing them more instead of showing them all up front. And then that third email can be an offer or reason to take that next step. This might even show up in their inbox after they've finished the reader magnet. Keep in mind, sometimes it's going to take multiple touch points to get somebody to take a certain action. So you can't just assume that they're going to get to the end of your reader magnet, see your call to action, and just buy your book right then and there. Some might, but not all will. Having something to follow up after that is really important. So this could be a deal or the hook of the next book or offering a bundle. If you do direct sales, you've got so many tools at your disposal here, right, that you could use. But even if not, you're selling on Amazon or another platform, you can still make that work, right? And here I have also a longer 7 email long magnet to sale sort of skeleton for you. So we've got the welcome email plus some instructions on if they had trouble. Here I have an example of you ask them to reply. This is a way for you to gauge engagement. So reply with your favorite trope, or it could be anything, right? Assuming that they haven't read your book yet. Reply with your favorite author, for example. Here's what to read next in the reading order, or just showing them what the reading order is going to be. This is setting expectations that, hey, you're going along a path here. There's step 1 and step 2, right? Sometimes they might not even know. Is this just a free book or is this a part of a greater series? You have to communicate that information at some point. The story behind the story, this can be sort of a soft call to action. This is maybe a meet the author email, talk about how you came up with the idea of the book. Again, this is an example skeleton. You could take this and tweak this, but I just want to give you the idea. You can send a meet the characters again with another call to action in there. You'll notice how we're fitting in that call to action more and more as we get here toward the end of the sequence. We can then share social proof and reviews, again, along with a call to action. And then we make that final offer there at the end. Each one of those lines is a separate email. And ask yourself how many of you, or ask, I guess, you wouldn't ask yourself this question. I will ask you all this question. How many of you have crammed all of these things into one email? You have an email that's like, well, meet the author. Oh, and here's the main character from the story. And here's some reviews. And oh, here's an offer. And you've crammed all of that into one email, right? And there's no sequence now, right? So we want to set those expectations. That's why we have this reading order up here early, right? We're setting this expectation of a sequence. That's why we would want to put on our thank you page that, hey, I'm going to be sending you some emails over the next couple of weeks, right? We're giving them that anticipation that there's going to be more coming and that there's more down the road. So try to break up that information in that sequence. And of course, a last call. I almost forgot. All right. A last call. And this is great for segmentation, right? Which is at some point, you kind of got to determine whether or not they're a good candidate or not. You may want to aggressively remove readers from your list. You may want to put them into kind of a holding pattern or a loop after this. And so a last call, like, hey, here it is. If you don't take it, this is it on that offer, for example. And if they take it, they take it. If not, I would move them into some kind of holding pattern or loop that continues trying to warm them up over time. Again, creating more touch points, or let them go. I know some authors are very aggressive about that sort of thing and just decide, you know what, if they went through those 7 emails, right, or however many emails long you decided it should be, and they didn't buy, then that's okay. they can come back to me on their own. Lovely. I knew this was going to happen. But let's get all the text here on the screen so that it doesn't look too odd. But we're talking about failure mode number 5. You're getting a preview of sort of this troubleshooting matrix. But this is where we're talking about measurement blindness. So here on the left-hand side of the screen, we want to track some very specific numbers. This won't be too bad here. Having these two side by side, we want to see our landing page conversion percentage. That's clicks to claims. BookFunnel shows you this in your stats for your landing pages. This is also why I recommend you use different landing pages for different sources. Use a certain landing page for your reader magnet in promos, and then use a different different landing page for that reader magnet when you share that somewhere else, right? On social media or a specific social media platform, or tied to a specific offer, right? Whatever the case may be. Your cost per subscriber or subs per promo. The cost might be money, it might be time. And so in the case of ads, or if you're running ads to a reader magnet, it's literally dollars, right? But promos have a cost too, which is you have to share it with your newsletter. Most promos cost you about a month in terms of commitment to that promo. It doesn't take literally a month to like a literal month of your time, but you understand what I mean, right? Have an idea of what you're getting, what returns you're getting from those group promos if you're doing those. And maybe again, if it's not a BookFunnel promo, maybe it's a different source where you're promote. Say you've got a social media account that you're using. It would be a good idea to know, okay, I've shared this link X number of times, and this is the number of subscribers I've got. This many pieces of content, for example. If you do YouTube, I've had that link in the description of 10 videos. And it's yielded this many subscribers, right? Some kind of read rate proxy. And so this would be clicks to downloads, that gap between them claiming the book and actually downloading the book. You'll typically see that you'll have more claims than downloads on BookFunnel, and this is because readers will claim it and then they'll come back to it later and download it later. There are other read rate proxies that you can use. For example, in your welcome sequence, you might have a read now button that links them to a sample of your book. You can do this with BookFunnel. And at the end of that sample, you have a link for them to then move on and actually read it in their browser, or read it in the BookFunnel app, or actually download it from a download page. You can track stats on that too. And so that gives you a little bit more insight into like, okay, who's actually started reading. That sample strategy I mentioned earlier, where we have a sample of book 1 at the end of the reader magnet, it's at the end, it's at the back matter, right? So look at those back matter link clicks as well, because that will tell you they probably didn't get to the back matter by skipping ahead to it. They probably read the reader magnet. We want to see email open and click rates. These early emails, especially, those are usually going to be higher than average, right? Right when they claim the book, they get an email right away. They're more likely to open those emails when they're fresh and new to your list. They just claimed your reader magnet, so capitalize on that. And then any kind of sales conversion that you are able to track. This is really a lot easier to do with direct sales, folks. It's harder to do with other platforms, but you can. Of course, there's Amazon attribution links if you're on Amazon primarily. There's also Amazon associates links, which you can use as long as it's not in an advertising context. Both can give you some interesting data, and both have their pros and cons, but it gives you more information from Amazon. I know a lot of folks are probably using Amazon. That's a good way to kind of get some additional data. You can create a specific link for the back matter of your reader magnet and then see what happens from there. And don't sleep on associates links. I know associates links, most people tout them because you can make a few extra cents on your book if it sells on Amazon, but it also tells you about reader behavior because you can see what other purchases they make, right? Because you'll get commissions on those too. So if you see a whole bunch of people who are clicking on the link to your book on Amazon through your associates link, and then they go on to buy a book that's in a different genre a lot. Oh, okay, we have a genre mismatch, for example. There's more data there. So the troubleshooting matrix, which has been on the screen the whole time, right? Again, low opt-ins, that typically means that there's a mismatch, could be friction, right? If our landing page isn't doing its job. We have high opt-ins, but low actual downloads. Well, this can be friction potentially, but this can also be kind of a timing thing. So keep that in mind. You might not always see that those downloads happen right away, depending on the audience you're aiming at. You have high downloads, but low clicks or low conversions to whatever the next step you want to take is. And that's again where we have that weak next step or a weak call to action. Now, if we've got high clicks on that call to action, but no sales, or again, whatever it is we want to have happen at the end of this reader magnet, reviews, whatever, right? It's that the offer, the store, the price, or the proof, there's something that's missing there. And then if we have high sales and just the growth is low, that's kind of more of a traffic issue. You probably just need to bring in more traffic because if you've got the sales, you just don't have the growth that you want. Everything else is working in terms of percentages. All we want to do is then increase the raw number, the total. Beyond those 5 modes, though, I do want to talk about when it's the story because this can sometimes happen. If everything else is running on all cylinders, but you're still not seeing the results you want, it may be the story or the content of the reader magnet itself that's causing issues for reader conversion. Now, some of this we've kind of touched on already a little bit. We talked about genre mismatches and that sort of thing. But even if the genre matches, sometimes there's an element of the story that's not working or the story is not compelling enough. If you put your magnet in front of the right audience, reduced friction, and given clear next steps and closed all those gaps we've talked about, and you've been patient as well to give it some time to see if everything bears out, it might be time to go back to the drawing board. I've done this myself. I had a reader magnet that I wrote. It was okay. Kind of, one of those things where I wrote it because I had to kind of thing. And it didn't do the job I needed it to do. I could do all 5 of those things that I talked about, and it wasn't working because it just wasn't a compelling story. So I wrote a new one. And that, in fact, would be my suggestion to you if that's where you find yourself. Sometimes it's worth it to start fresh. Write a new reader magnet with these things in mind from the very beginning. And in particular, make sure that the story is compelling. If you're writing in fiction, if you're writing in nonfiction, you're still telling a story in a way, right? You're solving a problem. You want to tell the reader the story of how their problem is going to be solved in a compelling way, right? When they take those next steps. After doing that, I've seen a night and day shift in terms of my reader magnet conversion and how the whole thing works. So I highly encourage you, if you find yourself at this point, you've tried everything, you've looked at all the data. And I'm not saying that any one of you for sure are here right now, but if you've been pulling your hair out, try to figure this out. Sometimes it's worth going back to the drawing board. Maybe rewriting the magnet can help. Maybe, but for the most part, I think it's better to start fresh. So I do want to make one final note on BookFunnel promos, because a lot of you here are your BookFunnel users. You're going to use BookFunnel promos as the primary vehicle to get your reader magnet in front of readers, which is great. But if the only audience you put your book in front of are readers you've found through BookFunnel promos and swaps, then you've only reached one segment of readers. Like, don't get me wrong here. BookFunnel promos are great, but they are a distinct audience of readers, and they do not reflect all readers out there. This is important for you to know. Readers in BookFunnel promos have a certain set of expectations. They have certain tendencies. Readers that you're going to find through running an ad on Facebook are going to have different expectations. Readers you're going to have in different places, right? And I have some examples here. So my suggestion would be, you don't have to drop the BookFunnel promos, but drive some traffic from more than just one source. You can run ads to your reader magnet, engage in social reader groups like Facebook reader groups. Try using social media. Like TikTok is the thing, right? TikTok is going to make us all millionaires, right? I'm poking fun, right? TikTok, though, does work for a lot of authors. Or different social media platforms. Try that. Try pulling in readers from other sources as well. Your BookFunnel promo readers can still be something you can leverage in specific ways too. BookFunnel promo readers, if you find they don't convert really well to sales, maybe they convert really well to reviews for you. And so you're going to primarily use that as your ARC team growth engine, if that's what you're finding. And this will be different from genre to genre as well. So if you've heard one author in a different genre say, oh yeah, I just do BookFunnel promos and I sell tons of books. If they're in a different genre than you, there's different readers. So just keep that in mind, right? Apples and oranges. All right. I was a little long-winded today, Kelly.
I mean, that's not unusual.
It is not, I know. I know we've got some questions here, so let's get to those here. I'm sure we probably have them categorized. I would hope, and then we can
Not this time.
not this
It was
time.
no, not this time.
Well,
We've
let's go. Let's go.
okay. So we had a question. I'm trying to find it again. I was trying to answer questions and then I lost it. Let me see. For everybody. Okay, so we had a question about using Canva in our
Hmm.
landing pages, like for branding purposes. This was
Yeah.
early on, doing like branding purposes to do like colors into the themes. So
Right.
can you just talk a little bit about how that's
Yeah.
important?
Yep. So Canva has a color palette generator. Kelly, I don't know if you can grab the link to that or not.
I can try.
If you Google it, though, you just Google Canva color palette generator. You can upload your book cover and it creates a pretty attractive color palette of, I think, 4 or 5 different colors that you can then take to BookFunnel and use those in your custom theme. Otherwise, you can kind of customize your theme to your liking. Canva has that tool and that's useful for that. But you don't have to just rely on Canva, say. But that's a good place to start, and it's a tool that we recommend.
Yep. Okay. Jim had asked if there was a good reference for learning the full details about genre and reader expectations. And then there was, and had talked about, he just recently learned that in romance that a happy ever after is the most important attribute. And knowing those, genre expectations can absolutely be super important because, again, if you kill off your romance characters, it's not a
Yeah,
romance and people get real mad.
they do.
So, so you want to make sure that whatever your genre is, you're hitting the expectations. And Jim Christopher, I just want to point out, if you kind of scroll back up, Jim Christopher had put in a couple of good resources, some links to Self-Publishing School and the Novelry that have
Yeah.
some expectations for different genres. So it's a large group of those. So it's a lot of people mistake that it's a spice level. Somebody had said, yeah, it's not. I thought it was spice level in romance. No, that's not the main thing. That those expectations need to be clear as well for your reader. And I'm sure in sci-fi, that's very, very, like, if you have a space opera and you put in like something that isn't in space, people will be like, what is this?
A little bit. Well, I mean, space opera. Well, we don't need to go to. That's a different webinar. I can do it. We can do a space opera genre tropes webinar one of these days, maybe. But no, but you're right. If there's certain things that happen in the story that seem kind of out of place or not, like they conflict with the general reader expectations, for sure. There was one comment here, and this isn't a question, but a comment in the chat that I wanted to highlight from Karen. From a reader perspective, I found a few annoyances that authors should consider. If your reader magnet is a sample, not a full story, make sure the description clearly states that. This is something I preach all the time. I think samples are a great reader magnet, but I recommend label it as a sample, give it away without asking for an email. I've talked about this in our 5 reader magnets every author needs webinar, so check that one out on YouTube if you haven't yet already. And it's very annoying to think you have a full story and find out it's only a small percentage because you weren't told. If it's a short story novella, same thing. Make sure that's clear. Don't call it a book when it's a novelette or a novella.
Yep.
That's
Always
a
give
point of
them their
friction.
expectation. Yeah.
It's a point
Yeah,
of
for
friction.
sure.
For sure.
Um,
It's rapid fire here, Kelly.
Kathy is asking if our magnet is a short story. How do we know read through or even
Yeah.
if it's a book?
Yep. So read through again. It's going to come down to those back matter links. You should be tracking clicks on those, seeing right where they're going. There's a number of ways you can track clicks on links. There's a number of tools, that can do that if you're sending them to somewhere other than BookFunnel, right? So there's things like Genius Link can track that sort of stuff. That can give you some insight into to read through. Or you can send them to another piece of content through BookFunnel, that sort of thing. And then also, like I mentioned, in your welcome sequence, I do recommend including like a start reading now that goes to the sample. It's basically the sample link so it's tied to your landing page, so they can start reading a sample in their browser and then include a call to action there. And that tells you at least that they initiated the reading process and they started reading. So that's kind of what you have to do there. It's that call to action at the end primarily that tells you that they read all the way through.
Okay, so John had a couple of questions. One is, so give folks directions when you were talking about like how to give people places to go. Like go to Amazon and search for as well as the link. So I'm thinking he's saying, like, do you direct them just to Amazon or just the link? And then
Oh,
his
yeah.
and then his second question that came not long after is how many calls to action in a newsletter?
Yeah. So in a newsletter, okay, two things there. So yes, if you're sending them to Amazon, you're sending them to your book's page on Amazon, ideally using an associates link or an attribution link so you can track some more data. And then as far as the number of calls to action in a newsletter, it can vary a little bit depending on how aggressive the calls to action are. So a generic newsletter can include like, hey, I did this thing over here on social media. Go check it out, right? And they click over to your social media profile. Or I uploaded this free content onto Patreon. That's again a low friction call to action. I'm not like you say like buy this book and then buy this one and then buy that book. I would say it's kind of what you kind of want to use the 80-20 rule. And only 20% of the time do you want to be doing kind of the hard sell, right? If that makes any sense. We've got time for one more really good question that I'm sure you've handpicked for me, Kelly, and then we've got to go.
All right. So what if you don't have any other books to sell and you're just getting started in your writing career?
Write another one. Write another one. But I would say there's still other things you can do. They're on your newsletter, but what else? What are your other goals? Do you want to, is social media going to be a part of your business model? Is Patreon something that you want to do? Patreon can be free. You can start a free Patreon. If you want to do a paid Patreon someday, I would recommend starting with a free one, right? What's the next thing that you want them to do to kind of follow along and stay further connected with you, get them more enmeshed so that as you continue to release content, they're still there. They've still stuck around. That's what I would suggest. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you to everybody. I'm sorry we kind of had to rush it there on the questions. We do have to get to our last session of the day. That's going to be your first in-person sales event. I will see you hopefully here in just a few minutes, but if not, I'll see you for our next session, BookFunnel Live in February, which will about a month away. So thank you, folks, again. See you all in the next one.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.